Call today's special board of directors meeting Thursday, August 7th, 2025 to order. Would you please take the roll?
Yes, Ms. Shai. Mr. Pacino.
Here.
Mr. Lombardi.
Present.
Director Alvini.
Here.
Mr. Benoit.
Here.
Mr. Colley.
Here.
Very good. The first order of business today, I'm going to, given the volume of comments and new information that we've had presented in the efficiency study and the impact of the proposal before us, public information that's come from the public during the last couple of weeks, I'd like to propose that we table the decision today on the route changes that we were contemplating on making at today's meeting until a meeting in the near future. I'm not talking about months, I'm talking about days or weeks. So I propose a motion to table the board's decision on proposed cuts for a short period of time. I asked that RIPTA provide additional detail. Right.
I make the motion to table.
Second.
I have a motion and a second.
I have a question.
Yes.
Does that mean that we are not going to be commenting on the proposed cuts today?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
I think it'll, as a matter of fact, I think this is a more appropriate approach rather than acting quickly on the heels of the public comment just ended. Yes. Let's give the board a chance to assimilate those comments and to consider them. We're having a presentation by the authors and the consultant of the efficiency study today. Let's have us kind of have that information percolate and come to an understanding of what they're recommending and some of the discussion that we'll hear from the administration today. Rushing into a vote, I don't think serves anybody, but this will give us a little bit of breathing room to really truly consider many of the facts that have been laid out.
Fine. I have no problem tabling it. You know, I think I certainly have some items I'd like to discuss.
We'll give you plenty of opportunity to
Thank
do
you.
that. You betcha. So we have a motion in a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. The motion passes. We've tabled the decision. I'm also asking that we alter the agenda order. I'm going to alter the agenda so that we can have the information presented to us in an orderly fashion. So I'd like to shift our timetable on the route changes, number one, but I'd also like to take comments and others in a different order than the agenda currently has them, so that we can properly hear the testimony, hear the public having discussion. So I will recognize a motion to change the agenda.
So moved.
Wait,
Seconded.
which way are we changing? Just to be clear.
So I think I think the change is, let's have the various discussions by the staff and the consultant first, and then hear public comments, so they have an opportunity to hear what's said also. And then have the public comments so that we have an opportunity to hear everything that's being proposed.
That makes sense.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? So the first order of business, and before we get started, as kind of kick off the meeting, all of the members of the board this morning received a letter from the Governor McKee. And I'd like to have that letter read into the minutes of the meeting and for the public to hear the contents of that letter, kind of start things off here this morning. So if you would, please read the letter that we all received so that the public also I can hear the words of the governor, thoughts of the governor.
Thank you, Director. The letter is dated August 7th, 2025. It's to the Rhode Island Public Transit Authority Board of Directors. Dear members of the board, writing ahead of today's board meeting for the agency's current proposal to address its budget shortfall will be reviewed. This meeting comes after my administration has taken significant steps to shore up RIPTA's finances and give the agency time to plan for a more sustainable future. Earlier this year, I recommended and the General Assembly appropriated an additional $15 million in state funding for RIPTA, bringing total annual state aid to $65 million, a 30% increase. This builds on the $15 million in one-time federal pandemic relief funds my administration provided last year to give RIPTA more time to prepare for the end of its pandemic-related support. I made these investments because I believe in the value of public transit and the critical role it plays on our most important routes, helping Rhode Islanders get to and from work, school, and medical appointments every day. Supporting public transit is important, as is protecting the public's trust in how we spend their money. Short-term funding alone cannot resolve long-standing structural challenges. RIPTA must operate within its means, protect core services like the RIDE program for individuals with disabilities, and use taxpayer dollars responsibly. With ridership down more than 25% over the past decade, fares unchanged for 15 years, RIPTA's underperforming services must be realigned to ensure the system's sustainability.
Yeah.
That's why we required RIPTA to commission a third-party efficiency study to identify high-cost, low ridership routes, recommend best practices for fare adjustments, and highlight opportunities to improve operations and maximize federal funding. The study highlighted that some of these services are unsustainable, with some routes having costs as high as $40 to $80 per passenger trip. Transit agencies across the country face similar financial pressures and are making comparable changes to realign services and update fare structures. To put the agency on stronger long-term financial footing, at today's meeting, I urge the board to direct the agency and its vendor to develop a new proposal, one that balances new revenue strategies with targeted reductions to low-performing routes. The current proposal, which relies too heavily on across-the-board reductions to routes, should be rejected in favor of a plan that includes eliminating or restructuring the lowest performing routes, better match demand and reduce costs, reducing management and administrative costs of the authority, maximizing federal funding, including the Job Access and Reverse Commute Program and indirect cost recovery, implementing a fare adjustment as recommended in the efficiency report, including fare increases aligned with inflation and a shift towards zone-based pricing more than 15 years without a fare change. Pending the development of a new, more balanced proposal on the points above, we are open to continuing discussions about identifying additional short-term resources for the agency. As governor, I have a responsibility to riders and to hear their concerns, but I also have a duty to every taxpayer footing the bill. We're asking Rhode Islanders to contribute more than the $65 million they already provide each year. We must right-size RIPTA, rebuild its financial foundation, and protect the core services that so many rely on. Sincerely, Daniel J. McKee, Governor.
Thank you. Well, the first order of business is to have the efficiency study presentation, and I'll hand things over to Chris Durant.
Thank you, Director. Eric and Wes. Eric Offenberg is the so these are the core people involved with the team. Several others who have been digging into our financials information pretty thoroughly. So they're here to go through the presentation, ask questions, to answer questions. Also, talking with both recognizing information that we're going through. Board members have questions that are available to deal with any board members. We're happy to facilitate that.
Great. Thank you, Chris. My name's Eric Offenberg. I'm the Senior Vice President with WSP, consultant that worked on this project, and I'm the Transportation Manager for the state of Rhode Island.
Thank you, Board Chair. My name is Wes Edwards. I am the project manager for this. I'm also Senior Vice President of Planning. So I'm here today, obviously, to present on the operation efficiency study. I recognize that these ongoing conversations about future conversations, our intent for this report is to provide information to the decision makers to better understand its operations and help inform decision makers about decision. Also want to thank the around 20 different people from multiple WSP, Foursquare IT in New England and across the country who helped to deliver and write the report. I also want to thank the 6 other transit agencies that we mentioned today as we reached out to process how their operations worked and also provide their guidance and their insight. Lastly, I want to make sure to thank the group staff. Not only continue to operate transit service every day for the past few months with work on this report, but also met with us multiple times as our consultant team dived into assessing the RIPTA operations. However, there's no point when we felt the RIPTA team was not talking to us. They weren't helping extract it. All right, so additionally, I'll say probably have all seen the report at this point. You know, it's for 100 pages long. For any presentation I give, want to adjust this without a lot of time, so I'll get a review of this today. And as I mentioned, we are happy to follow up with board members after this with the next week. Get the right people in the room, get for about 20 minutes, follow up on this, try to take a deeper dive into this next question. With that, I'm going to go back to the presentation. So everyone has a copy of this presentation already. Well, I'll turn to the first slide. I'm just setting the agenda. So as I already mentioned, I'll give an overview of the operation efficiency study. First, I'm going to cover the scope of the study. Second, I'm going to highlight the revenue from our dive into RIPTA's operations. Last, I'm going to go through the recommendations after operations. Moving to the overview of the scope, there was four elements of the operation efficiency study. First was a peer and best practices review. This is really interviews with different peer agencies, as well as doing desktop research, transit database information, and trying to gather sort of what were other agencies. Compare them. Second is a financial assessment of federal funding, revenue sources, and operating cost drivers. Third was a performance assessment of RIPTA services, including both quantitative and qualitative assessment. Fourth part of this will be recommendations for both near-term shortfalls and future investments. The next slide, I'm going to highlight your best practices. So WSP and RIPTA selected 6 top performing peer agencies based on their size, transit services offered, and their service. Our questions to these agencies focused on their operations and services, like funding mechanisms they had and revenues, as well as their sort of innovative service. Some of the major takeaways from these interviews were that they have all experienced major funding challenges related to the upcoming expiration of COVID funding, as well as sort of unstable or flat revenue and the compounding factor of increasing costs. Many have looked at different ways to optimize their services, including changing their service levels or the types of services they offer, shifting their resources to higher performing routes, looking at microtransit to replace underperforming routes, identifying new revenue sources such as like advertising, user fees, and also all of them universally identified workforce improvement has been a major challenge. Higher additional drivers and etc. Moving to the second slide, I want to go through the highlights of the funding and operating costs. We assessed both RIPTA revenue sources and RIPTA's operating costs. In our revenue assessment, we focused on revenues and different things. We looked at the federal funding sources. The biggest impact to RIPTA's current budget was the expiration of the relief funds from the federal government to support these operations. We also looked at fare revenues. We compared what we call fare box recovery of RIPTA to the peers that we mentioned discussed in the fare box recovery being how much money they collect at fares compared to. Third, we looked at RIPTA's advertising revenue. We looked at fare box revenue and found RIPTA was higher than most peers. Third, we looked at advertising revenue. Found that RIPTA was just below the average of its peers. We looked at advertising revenue. Fourth, after all the other revenue sources are accounted for, funding from state sources makes up the remainder, the bulk of RIPTA's operating budgets. We also reviewed RIPTA's operating cost drivers. We found that their administrative costs were slightly below the average of their peers, with their operating costs, and those were in line with those peers in comparison. We looked at both costs for the revenue, cost per revenue hour and cost per revenue mile, and those were also in line with those peers. And we looked at cost per capita, and we saw the section. Moving to the next slide. Highlights of performance assessment. So this review was performed using both quantitative metrics around efficiency, impact, and equity. Also a qualitative approach to collect information on a variety of topics that exist in the state. Findings from these assessments are that fixed route service forms the backbone of the system as well, especially in the more Flex and Flex on Demand are essential for users in low density areas. But there are zones that are sprawling or do have overlap, so those services could Ride ADA and Ride Anywhere. Those provide life-changing transit access, particularly in rural areas that may not be served. And also, employer partnerships and community programs help fill areas where additional fixed route service may not be feasible. Those programs can also be supported. Moving to the last line, the efficiency study recommendations. So lastly, after collecting all this information, our team made a series of recommendations. We put together as near term to help address the 2026 budget shortfall, and also thinking about what are some priorities. So first, to address the FY26 budget, we recommended that there are existing opportunities to use but that will not result in enough cost savings to offset the FY26. Thinking about those federal opportunities, though, there are opportunities to federalize positions that are linked to capital assets. And there's also opportunities to increase the use of federal formula funds to reimburse segments in rural areas, get low income routes, and sort of JARC funding, which is sort of reverse. Second, beyond that though, service reductions will be needed given the scale. Second, as we think about future priorities, expanding employer partnerships and programs to expand revenue is critical. Additionally, strengthening investment in high-performing routes is necessary. Also, it will be important to continue implementing RIPTA's transit master plan and continue to support. So with that, I'll say again, thank you to RIPTA staff for this opportunity to support the study. Thank the board for opportunity to present today, and I'll reiterate our offer to schedule additional time with board members to take your answer. With that, questions forward or back to the chair.
Thank you. So I'll open it up to questions from the board. Yeah, Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you tell the board a little bit more about the short-term opportunities you see with federal funding? The report talks a lot about, not a lot, the report mentions indirect cost recovery as one potential strategy. Explain to us a little bit more in detail about how that could possibly happen in the very near future.
So there's a couple pieces to this, and I will say there's some elements of this I want to have in all the conversations. But because there's existing capital funds that come to the federal, there are positions that are used for existing operating budget funds that don't use capital funds. They could split that allocation so that a portion of the cost base salary benefits come from potential benefit sources. And I think the next step really is working with RIPTA to identify what is that right allocation for those employees, and do those employees have some capital qualifying activities that could be backfilled. There's additional work that's needed to identify what's there be less on potential positions. We want to take a deeper dive or have RIPTA work trying to identify are those the correct positions for capital work they're doing. What's the right allocation? There's a HR conversation of how to extract that, how do we move forward and capture that. Those funds, capital funds, decisions. I'll say though, that is not necessarily new funds, that is just sort of shifting funds. We're going to
How quickly could that potentially identify sources of income for the agency to help close the $10 million gap that we face?
So I might defer to Superman on that one because that is a conversation needs to happen, figure out what that model is for actually implementing something like that, and then what federal determines.
All right, let me see if I can ask it a different way. The report in your presentation today talks about additional opportunities to use federal funds, but will not result in enough cost to offset the FY26 shortfall. But do you have any sense of how quickly some of the other savings or how some of the other revenue in your report could materialize? I mean, we are facing something that needs to happen in the next 30 days. Is this money that could take us 30 days to negotiate with the federal government and make the appropriate structural changes? Or is this 90-day money? Is this 66-month money?
I think that 30 days would be hard pressed to apply but I don't know what the schedule would be because we still have to, RIPTA would still have to identify what that framework looks like, using with those potential employees and those opportunities. Outside of those federal funding, outside of the federal funding allocation for those employees, there were other recommendations that we had mentioned. There's some that could be more immediate, some that would have to be phased in over a few years. But all of those take additional work to figure out how much revenue would be derived from that implementation and also phase it. It's hard to say that all of these recommendations within 30 days and have it instant realization. There's still actually more work to be done. This identified where those opportunities were, timing, and the volume potential.
So I have a follow-up question or supplemental question to that. I'll direct it to Chris. I mean, Chris, you've had a chance to take a look at the recommendations of the efficiency study. I know that while the 30-day is a 30 days is a consideration of what funds we have and how we fill the existing gap. I also know that given a budget, there are things that you can do to replace the funds in the first 30 days if you know that these other funds are going to be available. How quickly do you think you can formulate a plan that you can let the board know that you can count on certain other revenues being redirected from capital to operation? Because a lot of the costs that we're looking to recover here are operational. Yeah. So how soon do you think you'd be able to formulate a plan that actually lays the questions that Patrick asked?
I believe we could put a framework together pretty quickly that did give us an outline what the activities. Yeah. We've already do reimbursement for quite a few functions. So I think adding to that model is not difficult. I think the unknown is we have to go back to FDA and say, not first of all, if price grant, but get approval to actually spend the money in that manner.
Yeah.
And I don't know, but that would probably be 3+ month process.
Okay. But is it something that if you have discussions with regulatory agencies, that you have a better sense as to how those funds could help the process that we're talking about?
We have a good framework.
I think that's going to be an important factor in the decisions that we make. So we'll look forward to hearing that from you. And we've now delayed a vote on this to allow for that kind of information to come to. Yes.
Just a quick follow-up question on that. Are you already calculating that in to the $10 million deficit, or is this different? But and again, I am.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So with the $15 million budget, the deficit goes down to $17 million. We used all of these recommendations to go from 17 to 10. And that's why we targeted when we did the service change proposal, we targeted a number of drivers that did come out to meet the budget. So we factored in those proposals. And then again, we said the gap cannot close. This is the number of reductions we have to get payroll.
Yeah, I think that makes it clear that the order of magnitude, by the way, I think there was a study for these federal that reallocate from capital to operations was not a big number. It's already factored in the 10 million. So the 10 million problem doesn't go away, even if you're successful in, allocating some funds. It's not a number. Does that number materially change or change at all your conclusion that there won't be enough cost savings to offset the need for service reductions? Does that conclusion change?
So our preliminary understanding of potential savings is about 0.8 to $1 billion shifted funds, go from the capital to the federal by federal positions. I'll say like that's a preliminary number that he's about the deficit. So it is only a portion.
And it's in the 10 already.
And so in that 17, I'm estimating that number 2. And I say that because we have 2 distinct functions within. You have the ride customer service division, because you get those ADA trips, and then we have a fixed route customer service department that handles fixed route. We're looking into blending those 2 together to A, just provide better customer service, but B, provide those functions are eligible on the ability management funding. So that's the other. So I think $1 million of it comes from positions that the city's recommending. I'll let the timeline staff.
So if you could give me a little more clarity on this. The funding that we're talking about, having available for operation, 0.8 to $1 billion, whatever it is, $2 million for the arrest. That is only a shift. It is not new funds. Is that correct? But it's a shift from capital or capital investments to operational costs. What have you identified the capital projects that would be affected by making that shift?
Only line item they can take that money out of would be buses. So we do service, which we can still have.
Oh, there you go. Yes.
That bus money to free up, but just to give a sense, $2 million is what we set aside for pure equipment technology investment. So there's not a lot of that, but in terms of preserving service, something that can be done.
But so whatever service is left, that capital shift, the shift from capital down, wouldn't affect overall operations, except that it would be in concert with whatever changes to operations.
That's correct.
I understand. Any other questions? There is another question that I have. The means and methods that you would suggest to go about determining the route changes that need to be made? Could you give us an idea of what some of the metrics that should be considered in making that decision?
Yeah, well, so I will add, I mean, part of this is WSP did a framework that evaluated the different across the system based on a series of different metrics. There's a lot of information in the appendix about what that could be. And those root scores are actually intended to support RIPTA, whether they're considering route service reductions, service increases, reallocation of service across the network, just to help inform decision.
Gotcha.
So when we were looking at making recommendations about if they need to cut service given the speed constraints, really focusing on those bottom half of the routes, those spatial routes in our analysis, is sort of we're underperforming, but recognizing that there's also qualitative inputs that we got a lot of our stakeholder meetings that should be considered. Like, are they a last connection for sort of being an issue? Also, are there opportunities to revise the network and think about there's, for example, like 2 parallel routes about finding to one. So also looking at statistics. So we didn't make specific recommendations about routes, but try to provide the information.
So then I'll go back to Chris. Is the agency considering those metrics to be a proper measure of where you could make your decisions?
Yes, so we used, that was the start. So our scheduling team took these rankings, understanding that this is what people are going to be looking to understand. What's the basis of the changes? We're taking the context. The current schedule on the street today calls for 400 of our drivers. So we know we have to get down to 322 as part of the cost reduction, as part of the service reduction. So the direction I gave to the scheduling team is you got to take 79 jobs out of the schedule. That's what you have to do. So our meeting issue, they landed on 79.
Well, let me just interject another question right there while I'm thinking of it. And the reason that you're looking at personnel costs, is that because that's the lion's share of the overall operational costs that go into delivering service? That's what, give me some idea what the order of magnitude is for that.
+%.
So 80+% of personnel costs in terms of being able to deliver service on a particular. Gotcha. Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt.
And again, service is one of many areas. So I know that a lot of hearings, I've got questions. You cut in positions for beyond. This is one piece of the puzzle. But to answer your question, the scheduling team then took these rankings along the direction to reduce by number of drivers. I believe they did work with the Foursquare team to kind of really look at this. The challenge with that is these lower range routes. I don't want to say that they're not important or effective or efficient, but these lower range routes also can get a lot of resources. So that could mean like, looking at the composite score, the 88.
Yes.
That's a few hours a week. So we can cut that, but we're not saving jobs. We have to save jobs. We have to take jobs out of the schedule to get the savings. So we started at the bottom and went up 79. We would have fully eliminated the bottom 25. So the team, which is, for example, one of our proposals is to eliminate the 69 that goes from URI to Narragansett. We would have done it this way, the 67 and the 69 and the flex zone. It would be no connection to equal. So we had to kind of take these rankings services.
I understand.
And
And
then,
balance.
and then balance out, how do we spread this around? I think in the study, they talk about a few different, you could start at the bottom up, you could spread it equally, you could do a hybrid approach. And I think we started with the bottom up and then tried to figure out what we serve. So 28
Gotcha.
is the lower range for, is the only connection above the hospital. So we preserved that because we felt that was an important connection. But generally speaking, in order to get the number of drivers out of the schedule to meet the goal, we had to spread it. And so that's why by taking the R line from 10 minutes to 15 minutes off, we were able to get more jobs out. So the bus will still come. It will be full, but it will come. That's allowing us to kind of preserve some of these other connections. So that's the approach the schedule team took.
I understand. So you started with efficiency study, call them least efficient routes as a starting point, then you developed your plan from there. Not sure that you can answer this, but I'm going to take a crack at it. Many of the factors in the previous slides that were presented showed RIPTA operating cost, cost of revenue, hour per mile, cost per capita to be on par or better with than the peer agencies elsewhere. Will these adjustments, these cuts, adjustments that you're making in terms of personnel costs, et cetera, will that make each one of those factors, the administrative costs, operating costs, cost per revenue hour, better?
Not sure. I want to look.
I'd be interested in knowing what the effect on those, because the operating cost review that the experts have given us provide those as kind of a guidance as to how we stand with other agencies. And I'd be interested in knowing if that is further strengthened or status quo or weakened by any of the changes that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I could, that's a question you might want to also ask the presenters here,
Yes.
because I mean, I take a look at your report and it is kind of in two sections. First section's talking about how RIPTA is comparable with like agencies. And you've identified that we're pretty good. We're ahead of some, we're close to the middle of the pack in others. But the way we're running is comparatively pretty efficient when you look at our peer agencies. But what you kind of leave uncommented on is what happens to those rankings should we follow your advice on implementing the cost savings. Do you have any assessment of that before, the agency takes it?
From our perspective, actually implementing these recommendations is an additional step. Patients make these types of assessments. Imagine, yes, a lot of those statistics that we made are essentially based on current conditions over the last year of analysis that we looked at. So I assume that there will be potential changes. And as the service reduction holds together, could be more institutional calculate that, it's hard to calculate that specific. Which routes, how much coverage impact, other additional administrative functions that will no longer be part of RIPTA's budget. Those elements would then feed into biasing that analysis to update those additional metrics.
Well, let me see if I can ask a specific one, if I can, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the report identifies how we relate regarding our fare structure. If we were to increase fares, does that makes us less competitive with our peer institutions? Is one way of looking at it. If we charge almost near the top of peer institutions and we are comparative with others, if we increase our fares, that metric gets thrown out of whack, right? We are no longer comparative with our peer institutions. We are now more expensive than our peer institutions, even though we are running efficiently compared to those other institutions. I mean, that's a specific one that isn't necessarily an operational metric that's beyond your purview, right? I mean, it's.
Yeah, I think we have to be careful in those kinds of comparisons.
Right.
Only because I think part of the testimony we heard was that these other agencies we're being compared to aren't in all that great a shape either.
Yeah.
So, and they're all facing the same kinds of challenges now that the COVID funds are no longer available, and will probably be also having to entertain fare increases and other revenue enhancements to continue their operations. So that, I think those rankings are something that are in a bit of a flux because of these factors are happening across the sister agencies. Or are they more stable and being protected against these same kind of factors that are affecting us?
So there's a lot. So I would say that there's similar impacts that operating that they're trying to consider what they change. Everyone we interviewed was actually very interested in the outcomes of the study. They also want to know what they might be doing.
Right.
So I think right there potentially.
So we're all on the same boat.
We're all-
We're all on the same bus.
We're all in the same bus. I think it's critical for us as a board and for the agency to take those factors into consideration, because apart from the nuances that Chris talked about, that it just wasn't within your purview to understand the little, we're not gonna have service to Narragansett, the university. That you're looking at numbers with, the state. But as we try to make our case to the public and to the riders and to the political leadership of the state, I think it's going to be critical for us to say we can make changes to be more efficient, but those changes alone are not going to solve the problem.
Gotcha. That, and you brought up an interesting factor. You mentioned management costs. So, could you give us a sense whether or not are you just looking at, for example, the bus driver employees? Are you looking across the board, including management changes that you would make in order to create some additional reductions in cost?
Yes, absolutely. We are trying to preserve as many. We provide service, so
Yep.
we have to preserve as many operators as possible. So yes, we are.
So that the cuts go into management as well as driver. Okay.
Everything is frozen. There's additional steps.
And when you say frozen, that means that there are management positions that wouldn't be filled. Is that correct? I understand.
They will not.
So it's an across the board look that you're doing. It's not just aimed at a particular segment of your employee.
Find anywhere program requirement does mean the absent that requirement that program will be permanent, we would have made changes to the paratransit as well. But now that that's a permanent program, we have an obligation to plan those trips. If we are shifting some resources to make sure that that vision what it's being tested. It's another layer of complexity of there's still a lot of oversight on those trips.
Get it. But you're not just concentrating on one segment of your employee base. You're looking from top down. I think that answers.
Yes, I mean, my key takeaway was, because I've heard this over the years, that this organization is very inefficient and so forth. And when we were compared to our peers, turns out, we're not inefficient. I was not surprised by that response, because probably 4 or 5 years ago.
Well, there's a comparison that so a conclusion that you bring is we're not inefficient. You need to always follow that by in comparison to other agencies that may be very inefficient.
All right, well, let me,
You know, so using that as a finite marker can be misleading. I'm just looking to be more accurate in our depiction of what the efficiencies that we're looking to. This efficiency study and the results of this study is to make us, regardless of where we are in the standings as we compare to other agencies, which may or may not be themselves, is to make RIPTA the best it can be for Rhode Island. And I have hesitated always at looking at outside of the state, at agencies that may or may not be running properly. The mark, to try and make the right decisions for Rhode Island. And I think that's what the aim of all this actually is.
let me give you a Rhode Island number. It's on page 39. All RIPTA expenses from fiscal 19 to 24 have grown at an annual rate of 1.16%, significantly lower than inflation and significantly lower than the transit industry as a whole. So for 5 years, we've been going up 1.16%. Find me another state, either quasi-agency or department in this state that has, and that budget's only going to.
You're absolutely
So that, to me, also says, again, comparing to others, we've been pretty efficient because we haven't made massive cuts and we've been able to do it at 1.16% annually over the last 5 years.
You're right. Any other questions?
Thanks for hard. But of course, with 30 drivers and over with 5 or 10 drivers.
So can you repeat?
So can you give me a sense, how do you cut a bus with 30 passengers over a bus with 5 or 10 passengers? What method, the methodology?
So I can take a first crack at this. The decision for that ultimately does rely with. So what in our study, we did calculate ridership into the understanding that it's a trip, but we also looked at efficiency. So if it is only 5 riders, we might have a high net year efficiency. So we want to make sure that it actually took that into account, because this was really just decisions about where service should be changed across the state. But ultimately, these were just informing conversations. RIPTA, who was then proposing this service change. So this was just this information guiding.
Yeah, sir. So what I could say, I'm sorry.
Yeah, good.
So in looking at the rankings and knowing that we had to take a certain number of drivers out, we purely went bottom up based on ridership. We would have cut far more routes would have been eliminated had we not tried to spread that out. We didn't pull some service off the R line. We couldn't have gotten the savings necessary. So I think that's where we tried to, the worst performing route on the is like 88. It's a once a week shopping trip. It's probably, I think, 4 hours a week of service. So we could cut that, but it doesn't give us much bang for our buck. We are cutting it, I should say, but that's why we had to, magnitude of these changes and how our system inputs, how to get actual save rates required us to go beyond that. And honestly, even the most public feedback over the past 12 hearings, we heard some of these routes at 69, 68, Tuckett, the Tuckett, they are, people ride those buses. We just can't afford to opt.
But how is that bus with 30 drivers and But I raise that try to that's
Cutting all, I think we're cutting all of it. If there's a specific, like what's specific?
so well. I receive a lot of concerns in my position, and the concern is the buses cut, and then over the other bus that with another client. So last week, I did the experiment because I was at the bus, so kind of like see to penalize. I guys come up with I guess with the decision, and then I see that there's a gaps that need to be filled in. And in those gaps, the decision is not for me from my perspective. It's not structured properly the way it's supposed to. So that's the reason I sent some of the comments that I sent you. Just to kind of like revise it and then to make come up with a solution. I like to see a long-term solution and long-term solution. So the report there are suggestions, but not a plan. And I like to see a long-term comprehensive solution.
Sorry. I think in terms of, I think you bring up a good point about long-term picture. We could, if we're taking the deficit from $17 million to 10, closing it with these service reductions. We'd still have a $6 to $7 million deficit the following year, not just roads. So like there is a conversation here. We're solving, short term this year now, but this, nothing here solves the long term problem because we'll be cutting again next year.
See, this is where we're going. I'll say this about the short term versus long term. The success of this agency comes not only in how it operates and manages and the services that it is providing out for it, but also on the funding pipelines that come into this agency is a major factor in the success of this agency. What we do this year, I think, is a starting point of creating what has been a funding kind of challenge on a downward spiral in the last decade or more here to a kind of leveling out so that we can create and incentivize the various funding agencies and entities that provide funds for us to include. Now, that means sometimes making some sacrifices and some changes that are appealing to the entities and taxpayers and in general, as opposed to particular groups in the state, but the general population and the general assembly and administration of the state and the federal government that funds us. We make ourselves more attractive to those kinds of investments, and they will, I assure you, increase considerably in following this kind of an opportunity. And I look at this as more of an opportunity to create that better future than something that is just a short-term solution. While we need to address some short-term solutions, we need to create a kind of a stable base on which to garner the support and revenue streams that we need in order to make that growth happen.
I understand that. Believe that, all know that. There must be short. You understand that? Then do you guys, I like to know that what RIPTA is doing in terms of like just these I read a lot of stories about like previous debate, irrational and different stuff. Website. And it seems like it's kind of like back and forth, going back and forth with the same issues. Like next year is going to be the same issue. And I saw there's a deficit. RIPTA projected $18 billion deficit for 2026. Right. And but speaking with all the top state leaders, what they're really concerned, their concern is like, well, we gave with this amount of money and for last year, and then what the funding was not used properly, because it's not used properly, that's what we say each time they have to say they have to come to this conclusion, which is losing accent. So that's the reason I said, I think this is the right time just to come up with a long-term solution. Exactly.
Absolutely.
On the personal and admin.
This is the perfect time for everyone, for everybody to get on the same page so that with whatever plans we make in the future, there comes with it the support that we need in order to make those changes. Any other questions?
So how do you decide which drivers to transition?
We started with the study rankings. As a starting point. Yeah, basically there's 5 or 6 groups that aren't touched. We touched everything, frequency reductions, weekend reductions, route eliminations. This isn't these changes aren't, I think. We've got to get the reductions we've got to get while preserving as much as we could. We're not preserving this over that.
I think his question went to how do you decide on which drivers? Is that correct?
Drivers.
And that's largely governed by the collective bargaining agreement that we have with what Chris and the study is doing is giving a number that needs to be affected by this. How that's implemented, whether it's by in some cases attrition, by retirements, by not filling existing open positions, how much of it will actually affect drivers is what they're working out with the union to determine, according to our collective bargaining agreement, which drivers.
And under the agreement, it's basically seniority. So it's going to go, the people who are going to get laid off are the ones that we've worked very hard to recruit and train and recent hirees, increase the pay, took care of the problem that we didn't have enough bus drivers. Those are the ones who are going to go first. And I'm concerned that they're not coming back. So, it's, that's the way it works as to how it goes. We'll go on.
There's an additional concern too, that if we do have to resize the workforce, that we resize it in a way that is respectful of these decisions that Norm said we already made. So that whatever resizing we do doesn't put us, at least with the level of service that we'll be providing that's associated with that, doesn't put us into some of the concerns that were coming from the bus drivers and the union at the time we made those improvements to the employee base. So we right-size it according to the service without putting the kind of burdens that were on the bus drivers at the time we made those decisions.
Yes. So we are working closely with these shifts.
Okay, good.
We are part of our strategy there is because we haven't had enough drivers, we outsource our ADA service to taxi companies. Well, we can move 25 drivers over to our transit, eliminate that taxi service. Our folks will have a job.
And the overhead and profit that goes along with those decisions.
So, stuff like that we're trying to figure out. Does not pay difficulty, but we're trying to minimize that with I would hate to see us let drivers go, and then after retirement in the spring, losing service and scrambling right back. So it's trying to be mindful of all those things.
Chairman.
Yes.
So that is one of my major concerns about not fixing this in the short term. You know, as we all heard as board members, prior to Chris taking over and recruiting all of the folks, one of the major concerns of the drivers themselves was the turnaround time that they have was so minimal that they couldn't get off the bus to relieve themselves,
Exactly.
right? And, you know, it doesn't sound, that's not something that shows up in an efficiency report. Not your fault. But if we're gonna go back to the days of a driver having to drive 4 hours straight and only having 3 minutes to get outside,
Right.
stretch their legs and get back on the bus, but not 10 minutes to go urinate at the, you know, where they need to, that's going to re-establish, you know, gonna go back to where we're gonna go backwards.
Right.
And I
And
think
I
that's-
think what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think what I heard you say is, yes, whatever resizing you have to do will take into consideration that not having that condition exist again. Is that correct?
Agreed, we've made great progress on that. I don't think Walter will let me out of this room and say, we still have a lot of work to do on these efforts, and it really
Yep.
does take time to figure out how to kind of rebalance routes so that it's, you know, these human beings driving these buses, not machines. So whatever the computer says, you gotta account for some.
Well, just have the human factor in,
Yes,
besides what the computer says.
yes, right, and I think that's what we're trying to do. And create a better working environment, a healthier working environment. To hopefully bring down healthcare costs. You know, there's a lot of work to be done, but we're not gonna pinch drivers in this process. Not gonna squeeze it that way.
Okay.
Chair,
Yes.
I just have a question. So after reading all of it, has there been any consideration for route restructuring for the pockets of areas of the state that aren't going to be serviced if these cuts happen to happen? So in other words, structuring so much so that these pockets won't be so huge, or if at all. Routes, I don't even know if that's possible, but has there been any consideration of restructuring routes so that these pockets of areas won't be strained?
We're thinking about that. I don't know how much flexibility. I think that's the, like, you know, we are trying to preserve as much as we can, but there is only so much flexibility we have. Yeah, I think we haven't come up with a change to what we've prepared so far.
Any other questions? That being said, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the carry out of the same discussion, which are the service changes. So I know we covered a lot of ground with you by direct questions, but is there anything that you'd like to add with regard to the agency administration's efforts and direction?
I want to recognize the team, the entire team here, what they do. Hearings are very, very, they're difficult to go through. The team's done an outstanding job really trying to process information, share information, make sure that it's getting out. So I thank the whole RIPTA team for all their efforts. Simultaneous of hearings, we had a federal triangle. So that it's another, but the team did a good job of getting things to get done. I think that, I think I've said a lot of what I wanted to say, which is, I think we are looking at major service reductions, absent any other solution. We are maximizing the efficiency study recommendations. I will say from our personal point of view, I told the people working on the study, I reiterated that this is an opportunity to have someone come in and look under the hood and help us be better. It's going to sting a little bit at times, people questioning how you're doing different things, but it's important to do better. I think the team did a great job going through the process, getting it done the right way. I think it's been a meaningful process. Honestly, some of these recommendations are things that we've been talking about for years that we just didn't have the ability to go out there and take the time. So it has been felt helpful, especially around these federal funding things that we just haven't been able to crack. So it's been a worthwhile exercise to understand. Yeah, I just, obviously it's a time. I think big challenges ahead of us, but I've said, I think I've said what I need to say.
So I'll speak for just me. I have, looking at the performance of you and your staff and decisions that you've made during last year, I have an extremely high level of confidence. I think it's shared by all of the members in you and your administration to be able to make it through this difficult time, making all the right decisions. So we have a very high level of confidence in your staff and being able to execute. They're challenging times, but they're also exciting times. They're exciting times in creating a new model to go forward, to really begin to create a highly successful and a highly functional and an agency that provides even better service in the future. It's an opportunity as well as a challenge, and I'm glad your folks are recognizing it. Any other board? Yes.
Yes, I mean, since we're kind of in the next agenda item, and I know
Yes.
it all kind of flowed. And based upon the governor's request of us today to take another look at this, I would be remiss if I didn't point out one of the things that I've received quite a number of emails on, and that's the URI rules. It seems to me counterproductive for the state and for the agency to eliminate the 69, because having worked with a number of the students and the graduate student workers at URI, not having them have a way to get from main campus to Bay campus is a deficit to the communities that are the host communities. It is a problem for the university. And more importantly, from my point of view, it's a problem for the people that work at URI. So as we rethink this, it would be my recommendation that we rethink that cut. Does it need to be as it was before? I don't know. But it doesn't seem in the state's best interest to eliminate that service. I'm sure every one of our board members could say, yeah, that and also the 72 or the 54, but I don't know how many, I don't know if anyone else got emails. I think my last count was 107 this morning.
I got the same one.
Yeah, so I wanted to make sure.
Let me make a follow-up comment to that. You have engaged with various businesses during the last year that have chosen to participate for their employees and their workers, participate in a very positive way to contribute funding for the purpose of having that service provided to their employees and people that make use of their facilities. Have you had similar discussions with the higher education departments or the universities?
We are just starting to.
Great.
Just starting.
Great. I think this is, again, another perfect opportunity to begin to draw and look at, everybody's got skin in the game. Your management team does, the board does, ridership does, but so do the employers and the businesses and other entities like higher education and education have skin in this game. And I think it's time we began to look at the resources coming from them to help support the service that we provide, particularly in these essential services for education. I'm glad to hear that you're doing that, and I'd be interested in hearing more about that in your final determination. Great, Rick. Yes.
Just on that same note, and not to go outside of what we're doing, I wonder if you didn't have a corporation or a nonprofit or someone else would actually sponsor the bus, that bus. So so it would cost X amount of dollars and sponsored by whoever might get a big law firm. I mean, again, it's education. You might get someone who says, hey, you know what? That bus is needed. Corporation will sponsor. Give you an option.
Yeah.
Well, the trustees.
Right. Okay.
If the AFL-CIO can sponsor a bus, do I get my picture on it?
I have a few,
I
I
have no opinion on that issue.
have a few comments on the service changes. I came in here actually prepared to vote for them reluctantly because I didn't know that there were any alternatives. I'm not sure I've heard anything about alternatives, so I'm going to have a suggested path to the future, so to speak. But the governor's letter basically says us and the vendor to look at this to try to find the savings. We're not going to find $10 billion, but this fiscal year, we can't fix this fiscal year at this level of that amount without the service cuts. So we're between a rock and a hard place. So to quote Rick Pitino, we have a big guy in the door right there, but Larry Bird is not walking through that door to save us. It's not going to happen. So it has to be fixed at the government level for this fiscal year. And we all have to work forward, obviously, to make the agency more efficient, come up with a long-term solution, all of those other things. I loved Patrick's mantra in June. Quote, going to keep pushing until the final gavel comes down. Close quote, which I thought was great. Well, the final gavel doesn't come down on the fiscal 26 budget until the 26 supplemental budget is passed next year. State law provides that the governor is to submit a supplemental budget by the third week in January, sometimes extended to a later date. Why do we have supplemental budgets? Sometimes at the state $14 billion level, there could be some increase in revenues that weren't anticipated. There could be some decreases. There could be savings in the state agency, had a project that's no longer feasible, isn't going forward. Another agency could have some savings. Money can move around. That's the purpose of supplemental budget. So supplemental budget can and does move around line items as long as it doesn't create the deficit. So,
Well, I think, let me comment on just. I think if you heard or read the governor's letter today, I think it goes toward what we've been talking about. Everybody has skin in the game on this. And I think it's important for us to show a solution that is multidimensional, that addresses the various concerns of the various entities that do provide the funding, including the governor, that we've made the effort to be able to accomplish what their intentions are. And the governor makes it clear in one of his sentences after mentioning some of the changes that he's looking for us to make, is that pending the development of a new, more balanced proposal on the points above, we are open to continuing discussions about identifying additional short-term resources for the agency. This is part of the process that I've talked about many times during the last several years that I've encountered at DOT. 8-10 years ago, we were receiving federal and state funding probably at the level of 20% of what we're currently funded at. There's a reason for that. We made the same kind of structural changes that are being asked by the governor here at DOT 8 years ago, and implemented a new strategy, new management, wiped out management, rebuilt it, and a new funding and accountability and execution capability that garnered the support of 4 or 5 times the amount of federal and state funding that we're receiving now as we did back then. That I think is a very important part of the message that the governor sent here, that there's a willingness for him, and I'm sure that the same willingness exists at the legislature and the leadership of the legislature. I've spoken to them. We have to show some movement on these points, and then it opens the door for further discussions about the additional funding that we have. I think that's the beginning of the turning point here that I was talking about. Any other comments, questions?
What are the next steps to get to that turning point? And when, right now, we're between a rock and a hard place right now, in terms of timing. State law says we have to provide 30 days notice ahead of time to changes in the schedule. Riders are obviously entitled to know what the new schedule is. Bus drivers need to know, and management needs to know who's going to be covering what bus, when, and what route. Hence, we have a choose up, which is going to have to happen before September 12th, which is the date we have now. I suggest
that question to the administration. What do you think there is time for us to delay a vote today and still accomplish those deadlines that?
Yes. I think you said at the top, we have days, week or two.
Okay.
We don't have a ton of time, I think. That whole 30-day process, we have a solid schedule for it. We can adjust it a little bit.
We can always have a special board meeting on Wednesday.
Well, we have a week or two.
Yeah, Wednesday's the latest date, if we adhere to the current
Is
schedule.
Wednesday the latest day?
Yeah, for 30 days.
We could change that. We could change the effective date of yourself out.
Okay.
Changes would have to be in place. Absent anything else, changes would have to be in place by October 1 for us. Like we're taking consideration of the first 3 months of the year, we're still operating.
Well, why don't you let us know what you see as a reasonable time frame for us to act in order to meet the various deadlines that you have to meet.
And may I suggest that we could always do 2 concurrent choose-ups. In other words, one with the current schedule and one with the cuts. Because if we don't make the cuts, the current schedule stays into effect. Now, I know there's an administrative burden in doing that, but if that buys extra time and flexibility, it might be worth it. So that's something to consider in my view. But we don't have a lot of extra time. So I think unless we have those discussions and the governor ends up comfortable, maybe finds money somewhere else, that we will have no choice but to put the cuts into effect. That's the
Well, I think
that we've been told.
what we're hearing from everyone is that it's going to be a combination of those things, and that there's a bit of effect on every aspect of the agency rather than concentrating a solution to one particular avenue. And I think that needs to be spread about in order for us to be successful in whatever we do, not just now, but in the future. Yes.
What is the timing to schedule?
Two days.
Excluding weekends.
First, if you could work that back from the various deadlines that you have to make to inform us as to what a reasonable time, giving yourself a buffer. Okay. Any other questions?
Just one comment for you. We've given you a lot of information to digest. We are available. We're happy to answer any specific questions. If you have more technical questions, if you'd like to do any follow-up, please feel free to reach out to Chris. We're available for whatever you guys.
Thank you.
I sent a I did. I meant to respond to my apologies, but I did share it with them. They are reviewing questions. We will get back that information to you. If it's helpful to me, let us know.
Okay, next item on the agenda is public comment. So if you would, we'll get the public eye, let everybody constrain their remarks and or comments to the 3-minute period that we have traditionally set here, so that we give everybody a chance to say what they have to say, so that the board can conduct its business more efficiently.
Morning, Director, members of the board. There are approximately 25 people who have signed up to comment.
Say it again, how many?
25.
Yeah.
Approximately. I would just make 2 comments. When you're commenting, please keep your voice up so the recording can hear you and it can be projected. And second, if I say your name improperly, I apologize. First,
So I'll reemphasize with 25 folks, if we're going to be pretty strict about the 3-minute period, so if you could kind of self-govern yourself, that'd be great.
first is Daria Phoebe for share.
State leadership has employers, providers, institutions, each standing and speaking to the impact of these cuts. I know several of you as board members did come to this public testimony, so thank you for that. The letter from the governor shows he did not read the same report I did. He offered a lot of platitudes to himself and very little to the right. His salary is up more than 1.16%, but the costs are over the same time. Our adjacent neighbors are found to be funding their transit systems. In the end, there is no way to save money offered here without cutting buses. The transit master plan is being treated as a wish list. The impact on the carbon reduction plan is being ignored, and most critically, rider impact is being treated as unimportant. Mobility is freedom, and until the governor and the leadership wants to don't stop blindly ignoring even their constituents, that freedom could not be assured for anyone outside of it. Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Next is Daniel Blanchett. Tech is Dylan Giles.
Morning. Thank you for this chance for us to speak. For those of you who weren't here at the well-attended public meeting in Pawtucket, my name is Daniel Blanchett. I live in Pawtucket over near the 76, and I route which, according to the service budget, which thank goodness you're delaying the vote on. The 76 would have been one of the ones that dated thus preventing me from getting into my job, which I work as an aisle captain at the Veterans Memorial Auditorium, or the Vets short in Providence, which is going to be not far from the State House. While you're taking another look at your service cuts and delaying the vote, I would suggest, even if you have to disturb them during the weekend, and considering that Pawtucket is one of the communities that is being affected, I would suggest we can constant dialogue with the city of Pawtucket. I'm sure the mayor's office and various agencies would be willing to help out because Pawtucket is changing. They're trying to do plans to rejuvenate the city as a result of turning it around to the current doldrums. A lot of the routes in the 70 to 80 block intersect through Pawtucket anyway, connecting many neighborhoods together, including quite a few of the east-west routes. Pawtucket east of the Blackstone, and some of you already heard when you heard these meetings already understood that it is. I'm sure there are plenty of ways for the city to help out, whether it be working with their current development plans or for some of their big name projects, such as the construction of the new Pawtucket High School, one by merging Tolman, Shea, and Jackie Walsh Arts High School. I also, as well, strongly imploring you to try and avoid the cuts in Pawtucket as much as possible. I'm sure that I'm sure that would do everything they could to accommodate you guys in terms of flexibility, in terms of creative interpretation, in terms of the transit master plan, as well as with some of the other things that happened during the life of the city. I know that the Arts Festival is going to be coming up while coming on this way on the 76th. I saw banners of the Green Festival that will be taking place. I know that the train station that is the hub is being well used, thank goodness. And those are my comments for now.
Thank you very much.
Next is Dylan Giles with Robin Paredes to follow.
Morning. My name is Dylan Giles. I represent the Providence Streets Coalition and the State Coalition. And I'm grateful for your decision today to vote on the most cuts that we're going to do. After 2 weeks of devastating stories. We've heard from people who will surely lose their jobs. We've heard from people, students who will not get to get to school. We've heard from many seniors who would be stranded. As stated here in the testimony from the hearings, the proposed service cuts would not right-size this agency, as said, and as the governor has said, which is, by the way, an incredibly tone-deaf way to describe these cuts. Rather, even critical agency. The governor's letter does nothing to assure me or any of the advocates that he has any interest in investing in public transit to the levels, the proper levels. This administration continues to time and again become touching the gallon, shortchanging bus riders, forcing RIPTA to dig through couch cushions to find efficiencies, trying to get blood restored. As we've seen in the operational efficiency study, as Mr. White points out, RIPTA is already an efficient agency, and none of the factoring overcome the massive debts left by the governor's receipts. RIPTA already has a lower than average administrative cost compared to other agencies. Cutting the administrative staff is not the solution to this massive problem. We need these staff members to get plus. Additionally, there would be follow-on revenue losses in fare box recovery and advertising services. I do want to thank the RIPTA staff for their compassion and what was a very difficult process for them. I'm sure that for many of them, it was the worst moment of their career. Chris, thank you for listening to every rider, who took time out of their busy lives to tell their story. And know that for each one of them who came out to the hearings, dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands are in their place, unable to get around, state stranded due to the failure of the McKee administration to maintain this vital service for all.
Thank you.
Next is Robin Paredes with Randall Rose to follow.
Thank you. I won't repeat what you probably all heard from various riders, including my mom last night. Thank you, Mr. Duran. I think you're probably one of the people who's helped turn this place around. Clearly, this is a political issue, and I think that there are probably some folks around this table who are feeling the pain, and there are probably some others who aren't because they're possibly more concerned about their political careers and their ties, perhaps, to the governor. His letter is garbage. It's gaslighting. It's gaslighting. And there were quite a few phrases used today. Resizing? No, layoffs. You think for 1 minute that people will not end up homeless, losing their homes, losing their mortgages, perhaps dying? Don't kid yourself. Expand employer and partnerships, revenue. Have these things been in place? Or are we just now finding out that this is what would help? Now that we're here at the 11th hour at the edge of the cliff. If you think it's easy, pick up your car keys. Go to Walmart and get one of those carts and haul it off the bus if you have one. and live like that for a change. And then you'll feel what it's like. Because people who are taking the bus are already struggling. And now you want to take that away. So I will repeat what I said last night. RIPTA is not a bus ride, it's a lifeline. When you go to sleep tonight, think about that phrase. It's a lifeline. It's an elderly person, they might get to the doctors, but guess what? Maybe they have lab work next week. Maybe it's February. And now the bus may not even be there. Let's sleep.
Thank you.
Randall Rose and then Representative Teresa Tanzian.
Hello, my name is Randall Rose. I'm from the Kennedy Plaza Resilience Coalition. I see there's no microphone, so I will just speak up. Okay. So, we all know these cuts are going to be very serious for bus riders, and I'm disappointed that cuts and fare hikes are still on the table. A lot of people came today to speak. The public comment was moved an hour and a half later than was planned, so some of the people who were planning to speak today had to leave. Many people have shown up at the hearings and at yesterday's rally, and they've been saying we cannot have bus cuts. We cannot have these cuts. This is destroying people's way of life and ability to get to work, leaving senior citizens stuck at home. A lot of people bought their houses because they chose their homes because that it was on a bus line. This is going to take away the value of people's homes. These cuts are really bad ideas, but as we've all said before, these decisions are not made by the board. They are made by the top state leaders. I mean specifically Governor McKee and Speaker Shekarchi, both of whom have spoken positively about the idea of service cuts and fare hikes, including in this letter. This letter from the governor says the efficiency study recommended fare hikes. That is not what the efficiency study said. The efficiency study said that RIPTA pointed out fare hikes would not be a good thing. The fare hikes at RIPTA would take away some passenger ridership and cause less revenue, wouldn't cause an increase in revenue. And the efficiency study doesn't dispute that. It just said, well, maybe it doesn't dispute that. It doesn't call for fare hikes on the fixed routes. It just says maybe fare hikes on microtransit. So citing the efficiency study as if it justifies fare hikes on fixed routes is a complete misreading. It's clear that the people who make the decisions in the state, Governor McKee and Speaker Shekarchi, are not fully engaged on the issue. So far, they just have been voicing things that are not informed. They say use smaller buses, even though smaller buses do not save any money. They say cut management at RIPTA, even though RIPTA has a lot of vacant management positions. These suggestions are not realistic, and we are going to continue pressuring the governor and the speaker, the people who make the decisions, because they are responsible for the suffering that will be caused by these cuts. They're trying to fudge the issue. They're saying we'll just have smaller cuts, but these cuts are not tolerable. And there is an election next year, and bus riders will remember. Riders have a vote. Riders care about this, and riders' family members care about this. Bus riders are loved. It's not just the riders themselves who vote on this, it's the people who have riders, their families. And RIPTA helps connect the community together. Without RIPTA service, people are going to be stuck in a much smaller geographical area. This is already a small state. They'll be confined to a smaller area. And RIPTA helps knit us together into a community so that everybody can participate. So I hope that when Speaker Shekarchi and Governor McKee get more engaged in the issue, they will realize that these cuts are not acceptable, and they will change their mind. It's clear they're not fully engaged. I kind of forgive them for saying the wrong things now, but we hope that they will come to reason, realize that these cuts are bad ideas before they go into effect and before the next election. And if the cuts do get to go into effect, we will be fighting back and trying to get them reversed, because the election will matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Tanzi, followed by Walter Malillo.
I want to start by saying that we cannot, by someone in this room today saying that we cannot trust the outcome of this study because we cannot trust that any transit system is run efficiently is pretty outrageous. It undermines all the effort that we have just undergone in doing this efficiency study, and to even make that statement just made me want to jump out of my skin. It undermines the utility of this report and the utility of transportation all across this country. All of these proposed changes will be painful for someone, life-changing for many, destabilizing. The one story that sticks out in my mind from the South Kingstown Town Hall was a young man who was going to have to lose out on a scholarship to a community college because he cannot afford a car, he cannot afford to pay for his own university studies, and that scholarship was his ticket to a better life and to the middle class. These proposed cuts are going to cut those life-enhancing social ties that come through the freedom to move around your community at your own will and to be a participant in it. There was talk today about expanding partnerships like that with like the ones we have with CCRI to RIC and URI. I've been working with the CEO in order to make those happen. I've been trying to engage the university. We will make that happen. These are things that we can do to grow our system, diversify our ridership, create stronger bonds in the next generation as they come up to be users in this transit system, because they don't want to own a car. They're not like us. They don't want the fee, the repairs, the insurance. They don't want all those costs. They are burdened enough with the costs of college and life in general. So we're ignoring the future. You want to build something strong? Start by growing it. This is a problem. This is a public transit system, and the primary responsibility is on the state to provide the services. Looking for partnerships are secondary and tertiary. Okay, they're necessary, but at the end, it comes to our state to provide this public transit service. Not a single one of those places that were reviewed or compared to peer agencies are free from state funding. And we have fallen short on that. And I'd like that question addressed when you guys have your next iteration of a discussion with the people who made the study. And I also want to know if there's going to be a public discussion, because I think it's incredibly important. We just invested so much time and money in that study. I want it to be a public discussion. So I do hope that that is going to be a public discussion. And right sizing, a word that we've heard an awful lot, means destroying. Okay. We worked so hard. You, the General Assembly, people in the state are footing the bill for this. We worked so hard that those employees to drive our buses, if we're going to right size and destroy that workforce by 20%, we've wasted time, we've wasted money, and it is absolute foolhardiness to do that. What other public serving agency would ever consider right sizing? At our next hearing for DCYF, are we going to say, oh, perhaps we need to right size this agency? Are we going to look at how efficiently, DOT is at serving the public here? Is that road too small? Only 12 people use it each day. So let's just stop repairing it. Let's just, that bridge over there isn't that important to, 30% of to 30% of our users. So why do we continue to do that? We need to right size a lot of things in state government. RIPTA is not one, and this efficiency study, which we did not need, proves that time and again.
Thank you. I think we've given you more than a minute beyond the time that everyone else has had. Yes. Thank you.
Walter Malillo and then John Flaherty's on deck.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Chairman, board members, my name is Walter Malone, I'm the president of business agent, for state, all of our hard members here at RIPTA work so hard to get people where they need to go. Let's hit home, right? Service cuts, service reductions, layoffs, possible layoffs. These are men and women that I've worked alongside of, I've seen come to the door, new hirees with hope, great job, and now they're at the point where we might lose. And like I said, that is. I always advocate for this. I'm very concerned, obviously, for them and their families. Also going to the public, going back to look at the target, 24% of the service. No reductions, service fund. Now, if you look at the line in public, what this means then, I mean, everyday essentials. We know where they go, we know what they do, but this is a lifeline, like so many others said, and this is a critical moment in Britain, because if we lose this kind of service, we don't know if we're going to get it back. We understand that we need adjustment and need efficiency, but right now, going by this letter, what the governor says, okay, we can have another study, we can look at the efficiency of RIPTA and what runs the cut, but you need a quick fix. Right? You need the service, some of the service, just back. You're taking away 24% of the routes. There is no choice. There is no option. So one of the things that the past year that you have done at RIPTA is alternate buses. Don't take away the whole service. Alternate a bus, 76, 80. So you're going up one way, you're coming back another way, and vice versa. So instead of having 4 buses out there, we use them to 2 buses. So there's a lot of ideas, and the union company, the authority, Chris, so many others work together. We work hard to get where we need to get. But this is about the public also, and it's critical. It's critical that we get the funds. We have to work together, state, local, RIPTA, and myself, the union. And we've got great leaders in the union, not only myself, but the board and members. And I just want to let you know that it's a great state. We need a great transit agency. It's part of economic growth. It brings so much to other communities. It brings so much to the communities, not only financially, but the social events and so many other things. So we need to fund RIPTA, we need to advocate, and we can't leave people behind. People around. So
Thank you.
John Flaherty and then Alan LeMay.
Good afternoon. Actually, I wish it was a good morning. I wish it was a good morning. So I attended several of the service hearings around the state. I saw a lot of anger. I saw a lot of frustration. I saw a lot of desperation. I'm sure many of you have as well. The thing is, there's really not much new about this situation, except maybe the magnitude. What we're experiencing right now has been forecasted for a very long time. RIPTA's fiscal sustainability called out back in 2002, 23 years ago, by the fiscal watchdog group RIPTA, acknowledging that RIPTA will experience annual service reductions unless a fiscal get-well plan is adopted and implemented. Here we are. In terms of RIPTA's efficiency, this is also something that we've known for many years. We didn't need this latest efficiency study, which I consider to be a downsizing study, not so much an efficiency study. We've known that. So what we have in this state with our transit agency is one that most states or metro regions would love to have, that operates as RIPTA does. It's one of the strong things about our state.
even though there's been a perception that it's been mismanaged, it hasn't been. We've known that. But this crisis was avoidable. We have in this state an economic development strategy. We have a state housing strategy to deal with our crisis. We have a climate action plan, as well as a law to back that up with mandates. Doing anything other than growing our transit system will be bringing us in the exact opposite direction that we should be going in. RIPTA is a public good. It's not a transaction. And RIPTA is a public utility. I want to leave you with one constructive suggestion for going forward, and that is that as soon as this immediate crisis is behind us, is to commit to developing a truly long-term and sustainable mechanism for funding transit. The analysis on this, again, has been done over and over again since maybe the 2008 Blue Ribbon Commission that Governor Kucheri put forward. So there's ideas there, and but this has to come from the board, and the board's recommendation to state legislators and to the governor for how we're going to actually fund this, because there's so much riding on it. I just want to leave you with one final point here, which is to point out what we are not doing in the state. This is according to the Federal Transit Administration's National Transit Database. Per capita funding of transit, state to state. Rhode Island's $19 per person. Other similar states, Connecticut, $68. Delaware, $101. Pennsylvania, $120. New Jersey, $143. Maryland, $199. I could go on. We're at 19. We have not made a commitment in this state to properly fund transit. And that should be priority one once we've gotten past this crisis. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Alan LeMay and then Brian Rice.
Morning, my name's Alan LeMay. I live in Providence. But thank you for delaying the vote today, but I also beg you to oppose any cuts to busing or reduction in frequency. These are essential to many people around. The way to get to work for people. This is a vital part of people's lives. And cutting busing, or as the governor wants, increasing funding, only cutting prices will only price people out of public transit. It's a valuable thing. I have an option to drive if I want to. Other people don't. I see every day that people, this is the way that they get to and from work, get to and from family. And I think cutting these things for people will only hurt people. This is a state that has an issue with congestion, with homelessness increasing, with cost of living increasing, and we're taking a public good, a public thing for the public, and we're taking it away from people and making life harder. I think in the end, it's only gonna reduce people's ridership, and it's only gonna create even more of a budget shortfall for you in the future. I think the only way forward is for you to invest in more busing, invest in keeping Providence and the greater Rhode Island area able to get around. Providence is a great place to get around in busing. It's tough when you're going out of the state. You have to plan an hour, 2 hours ahead, and that around the state. And that's tough. I have friends who go to URI, and if they want to come to Providence, they can be up and they gotta be ready for an hour and a half ride. It's tough for people. Thank you. Once again, I just hope that you please oppose any kind of cutting busing, any kind of cutting in frequency. People rely on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian Rice, I think maybe Brian had to leave. So I'm going to move to Ben Pham. Then next would be Jason Victoria O'Connell.
My name is Vin Pham, and I'm a college student. As a young adult, public transportation helps us explore and appreciate our state, such as getting an education, going to school on time, learning beyond the classroom to work in extracurriculars, and learning to socialize by spending time with my friends. The adult figures in my life, and probably in this boardroom as well, always wonder why kids these days are so attached to their phones and want to stay home. And my answer to that is because the built environment only supports driving, and many of us do not have the means or can afford to do so. RIPTA offers a window for us to get around the entire state and not just Providence. It helps us appreciate our surroundings, like our libraries, our malls, and most importantly, our beaches. And by cutting service, for example, nearly every route to the beach, you are limiting our abilities to appreciate what our state has to offer. The skills we learn riding the bus and the places we go are important for us because we learn how to manage our schedules and when to get off the bus. And these are important for us to become well-engaged and responsible adults, and most importantly, constituents that vote accordingly. I'm asking the board to please reconsider the cuts. The last service hearings just happened yesterday, and we need more time to look into the rider stories and consider the young adults of this state. Because without adequate public transportation, why would any young adult like myself want to live and love Rhode Island? We aren't Cape Cod. Rhode Island deserves to be an emerging state. RIPTA is the way to go to do so.
Thank you.
Jason. Next is, after that is Liza Birkin.
My name is Jason Victoria O'Connell, and I live in Providence, and I'm going to tell you why we cannot afford to make cuts to RIPTA. While empathy is the reason I'm here today, I'm skeptical about the empathy of people who make decisions that won't immediately affect them. So I'm going to frame most of this as a sales pitch. Cuts to public transit will lead to reduced access to employment opportunities, including less jobs within RIPTA. In addition, businesses will struggle to retain workers who depend on public transit, and there will be decreased productivity due to longer commutes. All of this will negatively impact the local economy. Long term, it'll damage the housing market as well, because those who can afford it will simply leave as the local economy goes downhill. Public transit cuts will increase car dependency, leading to more traffic congestion, and that's what will cause the aforementioned longer commutes and environmental consequences like more pollution, carbon emissions, and oil consumption. Cuts to public transportation cause a spiral. Reduced service leads to decreased ridership, further revenue losses, and then even more cuts, and the cycle starts again, causing suffering and tanking the economy at every step. One appeal to empathy that I must make: reduced access to transportation leads to social isolation and mental health issues, particularly for vulnerable groups like the elderly, people with disabilities, those on low or fixed incomes, and people without access to personal vehicles. It will also limit access to healthcare, education, and essential services. And for the sake of the sales pitch, if those services are used less, they will make less revenue, and that will affect the local economy as well. I know that this board doesn't have the final say in how much funding RIPTA gets, but I think that you should refuse to propose a single cut to service. And if Governor McKee or any other decision maker says that there's no money for it, since money can move around, I urge you to tell them to look no further than the budgets for the police across the state, because different websites say different things, but it's millions upon millions of dollars for the state and local police budgets. And those police not only clear out homeless encampments, but they've been held at ICE to tear families apart and terrorize our communities. In Governor McKee's letter, he says that he has, quote, a duty to every taxpayer footing the bill, unquote. Taxpayers foot the majority of the bill for the police too. As a taxpayer who uses RIPTA literally 1 day per calendar month, if that, I am happy to have my tax dollars go to RIPTA, a service that helps my community, helps my fellow Rhode Islanders, rather than to overfunded police. My final thought is this: when you make it too expensive for people to live, you condemn those people to death. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
This is Liza Birkin and Elizabeth Hubbard on deck.
I want to thank you for delaying the vote and implore you to continue working for a solution. What did we buy ourselves, 1 or 2 weeks? Guess what? It is all of your jobs to change the governor's mind. Director Levine, I appreciate your optimism. I was listening to you on the radio this morning. I appreciate your optimism, but this is not a new beginning for RIPTA. I don't want to hear the word right size out of anybody's mouth this week. Call it what it is. Right size, that is a slimy PR euphemism for cuts that are going to devastate tens of thousands of workers. Let's strike that word from the record. No more of this right sizing talk. Just call it what it is, cuts. And we all in this room have a responsibility to avert these cuts, to do whatever, to spend every last crumb of political capital to save the lives of the Rhode Islanders who depend on this service. We're going to be trapped in their homes, stranded by the state of Rhode Island, in Kennedy Plaza in their homes, literally by the side of the road when the bus does not come. I want to correct something else that was said on the radio this morning, and also implore you not to let a right-wing radio show host dictate transit policy in the state. The number of riders participating in the Fare Free program is 24%, and it's a state requirement from the budget in 2017. We have a responsibility, a legal obligation to continue providing that program for those who need it. But most importantly, and kind of reiterating what Mr. Flaherty was saying, we have to change their mind. You're saying state leaders want these cuts. Can you please remind them about the Act on Climate, about the state housing plan, which is citing affordable housing on high-frequency transit plans, about the Olmstead plan, which is about reintegrating folks with disabilities into their communities, which depends on public transit, about the governor's school attendance shtick that is dependent on transit. All of these plans require expanding RIPTA and not cutting, certainly not right sizing. He wants to cut all the rural routes now and jack up the fare. How is that helpful to the broader goals of his administration? That is the argument that we need to work on. We, as the activists, I think we bought some time. So please spend the next 1 or 2 weeks spending your political capital. And yes, the efficiency studies, everything, we know that transit across the country is struggling. But guess what? There are many localities and states that are not struggling, that have found their way through this moment of pain and inflation. In New York, they enacted congestion pricing. In Massachusetts, they passed the millionaire's tax. In Minnesota, they passed a state metro sales tax that is supporting public transit to higher levels than ever before. Last year, in the across the country localities, there were 18 ballot measures in localities across the country enacting greater taxes, and voters voted yes on 16 of those 18. The city of Nashville. Public transit is popular, and it is, again, we need to change the narrative. And you all were appointed by the governor, so please do your jobs. We bought you some time. Let's work towards a solution that does not involve cuts.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Hubbard and then John Welch.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Hubbard, and I'm the Executive Secretary, Agency Head for Governor's Initiatives. I'm actually surprised I'm the only agency head who has been call for RIPTA again, because this affects every aspect of state services in the state. I thank you for your decision today to forestall the cuts. I've heard some other proposals that I don't quite agree with. I really don't think that asking private industry to give handouts to RIPTA is going to be the solution. There's no incentive from them to offer anything to the public. On the other hand, if we were to reduce the routes and reduce access, their access to employees who use public transit, make cuts, they're going to have fewer employees that actually can come to the job. For example, we're cutting several of the routes that goes to Bally's. Bally's just got approval to set up casinos in New York. What do you think is going to happen if Bally's all of a sudden can't fully staff? They're just going to close the casino in Rhode Island and put all their money in New York. Why not? We also need to consider the impact on social services as well as the education and other systems that we've already invested so much in. For example, Rhode Island Department of Education, they should be here supporting this because students can, use RIPTA, and the governor is very invested in school attendance, and having an adequate transportation system helps with attendance. That's because transportation is a barrier for students. We've learned that from looking at all studies about why we had issues with absenteeism. Also, the post-secondary education department, they should be here. Look to them for support. Ask them to provide new support because we have spent so much, money on already. RIPTA has already invested in creating the transit hub of CCRI Warwick. To suddenly cut those routes and reduce the service is ridiculous. You've already made that investment. So why are you going to pull back and then not see the return on your investment? Other state agencies that should be involved, Department of Labor and Training. They should be concerned. They should be supporting you because RIPTA enables people to get to their jobs. And it also, if somebody is transitioning from being off benefits to going to work, they aren't going to have the capital, the savings to be able to buy a car. They're going to probably have to rely on public transit to get to that job. Not to mention the people with disabilities who don't qualify for paratransit, but do rely on the bus to get to their jobs. Department of Health, they should be concerned because RIPTA enables people to get to treatment and healthcare. UHHS, Homestead Plan was mentioned, and in the Homestead, UHHS, those who are planning Homestead and trying to write the plan, and the small amount of public input that they've got, transportation has been one of the biggest concerns raised by people with disabilities, asking about what can the state do to help people with disabilities live in the community and access the community. And also, I believe the Department of Transportation should be pushing support RIPTA because it is going to reduce wear and tear on the streets, traffic, and reduce wear and tear on bridges. So all the state agencies should be asking them to support RIPTA and support funding for RIPTA. When it comes to the efficiency study, I understand, yes, we don't know, about the other states, but that's all we have to compare to. All we have to compare is other localities that are similarly sized, and those were carefully selected. And we aren't looking at other state agencies. No other state agency has undergone the rigorous analysis that was with this efficiency study. And if you look at the amount that is spent on administration versus on actual direct services, I can guarantee it's probably a lot lower than a lot of these other state agencies. So please support RIPTA and ask the rest of the state to join with you and fight to try to maintain these services, because the reduction in these services means a reduction in access to other services and a reduction.
Thank you.
John Welch and then Edric Keith.
John Welch, been a resident of Rhode Island 17 years. 15 years I have owned an auto, and RIPTA has been my primary transportation. My crusade is to extend the R line through Central Falls, 22,000 residents, stop and shop in Cumberland Hall. It's on the 20-year RIPTA plan. The only RIPTA bus service in that most dense city of Rhode Island ends at 6 p.m. The games at Centreville Bank Stadium for Rhode Island Football Club starts at 7. If they became these Eastern champions like last year, the game would probably be at 8 o'clock. Californians at 5. Partner that's ideal for that extension of the R line to support this is the Rhode Island Football Club president, because their average attendance is now to 2,500 less than the sellout. Getting 10% of 22,000 to allow them to sell out the remainder of the home games. So they're a natural partner. I have copies of my July 27th letter for each of you. Be distributed today, hopefully, so you can see what my thoughts are supporting this extension of the R line. I'm going to get a meeting with David Cicilline. We were members of Gold's Gym together. Because I live in the apartment in the parking lot adjacent to that old Gold's in that Valley dealership. LA Fitness has taken over, so I'm only 3 blocks, and I try to be an athlete at 77 years old and maintain respect as martial artist. If one lives and works along the R line, you don't need a car. I wanted to be a living example of what I believe. I was earning $50,000 to $70,000 per year as an RN, and I wasn't owning a car. I was experiencing the RN all routes, so I know what I'm talking about when I make some suggestions. Appreciated the time and attention of CEO here and his predecessor, whom I knew. This is on the 20-year plan. It's a natural partnership with RIFTA. High performance is 25% of the R line statewide ridership is on the R line. I'm projecting that if you extend the R line through Central Falls, will be 40%. If anybody has had their transportation cut off, they should follow the advice of the extended R line and live and work along the R line, because that's their solution. It's going to be much cheaper than those more expensive states in the South. Thanks for your time and attention. I've been impressed with everybody I've been exposed to, and I'm glad you had the opportunity, so I know who you are. Hope you pick up my letter there, and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cedric, and then Ray Gagnon.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I'm Cedric, and I'm nice to colleagues to go to school, active internships, to civic engagement. My original comments were going to be the plea that you relay the civics cuts vote. I thank you for doing that. So there was some other things that came up during the meeting that I wanted to address. Director, you asked did cost per hour and other efficiency metrics get better with service cuts. I think so much worse. According to a data analysis by MassDOT analyst at McIntosh, in 2022, when we made cuts because of the driver shortage, our cost per hour went from like $130-ish to $208 an hour. These cuts are going to be twice as much as that one. You also said that RIPTA being in line with queues wasn't a good comparison because I guess because the queues might also be inefficient. And I did want to bring up that according to the American Bus Benchmarking Group, RIPTA used to be one of the most efficient mid-sized transit agencies in the country. It was leading all of our queues. And I guess right now we're only in line with the queues. I think it's because of the service cuts that we made in 2022 that we're about to tell definitely. You also said that the RIPTA's existing downward spiral necessitates sacrifices. RIPTA's funding model is literally just not indexed to inflation. And a lot of that is because the gas tax, all of the inflation adjustments to the gas tax to write off. So RIPTA's budget has decreased 9% in the last decade. Then you also called service cuts as an opportunity to attract funding from the General Assembly and the federal government. I cannot think of a single service cut in memory that got reversed, like the temporary ones in 2002. I think there were ones somewhere in the 2010s. There were ones in the 2000s, especially because, and this brings me into the discussion about right sizing. Sorry, Liza. The mentions of right sizing
seem to reference the governor saying that ridership is declined despite no change in service. I mean, we've lost the online free photo pilot and the Central Falls free photo pilot, and we had the cuts in fall 2022. And we also had the driver shortage that led to reliability. In contrast, the 72 and 14 were some of the only groups that have seen improved frequencies, and they have higher ridership than pre-COVID. So what is the right size if ridership is directly proportional to the quality of service? Because if you listen to Hasbro, if you listen to small businesses, I'm already pretty upstream. But then the right size is bigger. Okay, I'll stop. Thank you so much for, I implore you to please be doing everything you can to stop these cuts, because the mandate that was given was to finish the efficiency study and to negotiate how much additional funding is needed. Thank you.
Ray Gagnon, and then next is Grant Delgary.
Oh, I'm Ray Gagnon from the Rhode Island Organizing Project. I want to thank the board for postponing the vote. My view is we should have no cuts. My organization works primarily with low-income elderly. Most of them earn well under the $1,300 threshold. I have one woman that I work with. Her name's Barbara. She says RIPTA is the people's car, because they rely on RIPTA for everything. Things that are obvious, going to the doctors, going food shopping. They also use it to get to religious services. Many of them volunteer. So cuts to that population would be devastating. The last 2 weeks, I went to Kennedy Plaza 8 times. I probably spent, some days I went for half an hour, some days I went for an hour and a half. And I heard many of the stories that you've heard at the hearings, and many of the stories that you heard here. I was most struck by the workers. I had one woman who uses the 14th to get to work. She was incredulous that it wasn't going to be there on the weekend, so I won't be able to get to work. I had workers who were telling me, well, if they change the schedule, my commute's just going to get longer. So RIPTA is an economic development strategy. And I'm old enough to remember when the buses were owned by private industry. I used to take the bus with my mother in Central Falls to get to City Hall or the library. On Saturdays, I would go with my grandmother to go shopping in Pawtucket. Private industry abandoned transportation. The state decided that it was a public good. RIPTA is a public good, so it's my hope that the governor will find the money to support the public good. Also, in terms of underperforming routes, I took the 20 bus here today. Came in 20 minutes, I was able to get here in 15. If all of our routes were 20 minutes or less, our ridership would increase. So thank you for your time. I thank you for your service. I know you have to put a lot of time into this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Grant Delgarian, and followed by Paul LeBon. Paul LeBon would be followed by Crystal Vargas.
Before you start the clock, just a personal note. Thank you. Come on. This is my stroke alert dog, Aggie. And we've been riding RIPTA for a year since my doctor said I couldn't drive anymore. And back in June, y'all had an all points bulletin for all the drivers. Be on the lookout for Matthew McCarthy, a guy with a white fluffy dog. If he tries to get on your bus, call the police. We took more abuse. I had one driver down in Whitford actually had the state police show my ID, so y'all owe Aggie an apology. Okay, as a former consultant public speaker, but I'm going to read my comments. Okay, I recently published a book called Hopeless Rhode Island Ocean State Underwater. And contrary to Governor McKee's comment that it's just a bunch of bitching, no, it's a lot of ideas, creative ideas to solve Rhode Island's challenges. I have a chapter on RIPTA. As a marketing consultant, I spent years helping Fortune 500 companies and state and local government agencies discover revenue opportunities. The first thing I always told a government agency was those people out there aren't taxpayers, residents, occupants, whatever. They're customers. Treat them like that. Treat them like customers. Okay, people aren't riders or passengers. I've experienced startup and transit systems in Nashville, New Hampshire, Cobb County, Georgia, and Denton County, Texas. Here are my suggestions from my book for RIPTA. Well, number one, close to 100 buses a day serve Bally's Casino in Lincoln. Taxpayers shouldn't be subsidizing a $4 billion company. Okay, I loathe Donald Trump, but if I can borrow one of his expressions, Bally's is ripping off the taxpayers of the state of Rhode Island. I say you should assess a $50 charge for every bus that delivers gamblers to Bally's, and if they refuse, then tell them, you know what, pull out, hire your own buses. Okay, let them take care of themselves. And I know the governor and the speaker get lots of money in campaign contributions, but you know, you all have to stand up and be the advocates. In corporate America, when one division is losing money, they shift money around. So RIDOT has a huge parking garage at the Wickford train station. I call it the Taj Mahal garage. It's beautiful. Just a handful of people who use MBTA rail or RIPTA buses park there. Today, the place is virtually empty, but starting next month, it's going to be jam-packed for the next 10 months. You know with who? With college students from Pennsylvania, Ohio, all the other states who go to URI. And guess what? They park their BMWs, their Audis, their high-priced cars, and covered parking with a 24-hour day service. Why not start charging them? Charge a monthly rate. You can get a few $1 million a year from that. Okay. I ride the 66 bus, and it kills me when I see kids from Providence who can't afford a car. When we get to the Wickford train station, these rich kids are dropping off their high-priced cars and catching the 66 to get back to the campus. I mean, that's a shame. Okay. RIDOT also provides free parking at the Pawtucket Falls train station. So hundreds of commuters who travel to high-paying jobs in Boston. Every station from Attleboro to Boston charges for RIDOT for parking. RIDOT should charge and shift that money to RIPTA. Our beaches in the state don't open until 9 o'clock in the morning. Okay, beachgoers can sit in the hot sun all day. The Wickford garage could be open for people to park their cars undercover for free and provide express bus services directly to Scarborough, Roger Wheeler, etc. You want an idea on how to cut expenses? Your flex rides. They take people from 5-10 minute rides from their errands or whatever. You know what? Do away with that. Get into a partnership with Lyft and Uber. Have vouchers for short-term rides. With all due respect to Mr. Duran, I mean, he's a finance guy. In corporate America, I found the finance guys kill corporations. Frank Lorenzo destroyed Eastern and Continental Airlines. I've always encouraged my clients to look for ways to grow their business, grow their revenue. As I mentioned earlier, when I started my career, corporations had layoffs and job cuts. Well, then they came up with downsizing and right sizing. I told them, you know what? You need to improve your value proposition.
We've given you more time than is allotted to everyone else, so if you could wrap it up quickly.
One personal point. I graduated from Woonsocket High School at 16 years old. I couldn't join my brothers going to General Motors in Framingham. So I went to Rhode Island Junior College. Thank God I had RIPTA to take me from Woonsocket to Providence to Warwick. I retired as a $1,500 a day consultant. I would not have had that career were it not for RIPTA. I'd have been building cars with my brothers and eventually been laid off. So, consider RIPTA to be not just a lifeline, but an economic engine that can help people create better lives for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you.
Crystal Vargas and then Laurent Martinez.
Hi, Crystal Vargas. I moved to Providence in 2021 from Los Angeles. Not the best transportation, but shout out to Metro, y'all are great. I moved here to pursue my degree in biotechnology from Brown University with barely enough to live for a month with my fiance. And I remember us having our backpacks and walking from Fox Point to the East Side Marketplace when it was still open, and we filled up our backpacks with groceries. And we had to walk back, not realizing that RIPTA is something we can rely on. So we ended up buying a janky car, and it would break down a lot. So my fiance would have to take the RIPTA bus from Providence to Lincoln, Rhode Island, and we thank RIPTA for that. A couple years ago, I was laid off from my job, and I did everything I could except go to church. I ended up taking the bus to a Catholic church and praying for a job, and I ended up getting one. So I thank RIPTA for these opportunities for us young people to get to a financial state that we need to be in. So I really need to see that everyone cares and will care about young people, care about elderlies, care about veterans, people with disabilities, care about people of color. Okay? And care about the working class. I yield my time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Martinez. Followed by Ilka Vida.
Doing this. It made me mad. So I'm a local member. I'm also a CCRI student and an administrative professional. I don't have a car. So this is very important to me. I want to go over the 25% ridership decline. How much of that is due to the past service cuts and changes? And how much is that going to fall after the proposed cuts? Part about having a responsibility to riders, but also having a duty to every taxpayer. Riders and taxpayers are one and the same. It's not that hard. Sorry, it's a little more emotional than I thought it would be. Just allow me to be theatrical for just a second and just. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Martinez, followed by Samantha Codium.
All right, I'm gonna be nice first. Got autism. I'm an immigrant, but I consider myself American because I've been here since I was 6. RIPTA ushered me through childhood, through youth camp, to different schools. I graduated with a C from high school barely. CCRI barely 1.5, whatever, because I come from a single parent home. We're looking for a brighter future. We have the innovators. What you're doing, I couldn't at the knees. We are a military complex as a nation. We are a caste system. We have the workers who keep you the job. Listen, we're going to turn the pyramid on the head. I'll be a Republican and a good one. Because this state, the Democrats did me right. They had welfare, but my mom never took it. She worked 80 hours with 2 children, so I was a mom. My brother's a doctor. I made sure he was first. Because as a black man, they're picking them up every week. We're in a we are living a civil war as black people and people of color. I only became black in America, in Africa. I became black in Africa. I'm whatever I say I am because I'm multiracial. So I've seen the game from all the schematics. And then in September, I'm going to be at MIT creating an AI to take your jobs. And guess what? I'm going to be at home taking your jobs because this isn't a casino. Y'all are bringing your rich friends to party. Can we party too? Can we not be the slaves? Y'all have the land by the water, and then you have the impoverished by the water working for you. Why can't we party too? Yeah, I want to party. I want my kids to live like I did. The bus drivers when my son went to school, he's in 8th grade. This is so-and-so. Respect him. If you don't got the money, he'll let you on. And when I see him, I will pay. These bus drivers are rude, especially these white males. They're ignorant. I don't have my thing because I have autism. I lose everything. Oh, you can't get on. Listen, I give you the job because you put me in position to give you a better job. How about we make downtown just a hub for buses, have the flexes, nobody can use them because they're $4. I don't got $2. Have them spaceship out, have the big buses for outer reaches, and get the little girl who's dreaming in Barrington and Burville, because that's where your DCYF lives. Get them to a better position, and we can grow this nation together. I want it to be cohesive. If it's not, I'm going to be the best Republican strategist there is, and I'm going to take all your jobs. I'm going to be the governor, and I ain't playing no games. I'm going to make sure your children don't work good. I'm going to make sure they're going to leave the state. If I go to New York, if I go to Boston, and I have to leave Rhode Island because I like the system, I am going to terrorize you from Washington. When I tell you, California's doing, I'm a California Republican. They're doing it. We are a microcosm of the nation. We are the 13 colonies. We should be embarrassed of a stolen land and we can't do right by its people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, better.
The man. That's followed by Tara Mack.
I'm Samantha. I had different statements prepared, but I am happy that the cuts were delayed, but I don't think the way to do it is to discuss cutting, like raising fares or continue to cut service. Especially when RIPTA serves like 60,000 people, Rhode Islanders a day, and we have single bridge projects or road projects that get funded to the tune of $250 million, but for like the Washington Bridge, before the closure, they had about 100,000 people cross the bridge a day, and we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars to fix that one bridge, but the whole system of RIPTA moved 60,000 people a day, could move more, and we're quibbling about a few million short of the levy. I think it's more about the political will to find the money than about an actual cost of the money. Taxpayers benefit from people like me who can't drive because of my disabilities, being able to go to my part-time job in Cranston, and I probably won't be able to do my job and get to my job as easily on weekends because of the bus cuts. Especially like a route as frequently used as 21, getting cut on weekends or at all is going to negatively impact the people who shop at those businesses in Cranston or the city area. People who work there, a lot of the people who work in that plaza, I see them all the time on the same buses that I take to go to my job. And like, one of the things that would make ridership increase is honestly having more like, seats at bus stops and improving the way to ride and use RIPTA, making it more convenient by adding service, by adding accommodations, will increase ridership, and cutting service will just reduce ridership further. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tara Mack and then Pat Ford.
Hello. I was first introduced to RIPTA as an undergrad using the free program at Brown University. And that's where I first got to see RIPTA as a public good. And as I continued to think about what is the use of RIPTA as more and more constituents who decide to be carless, all of my elderly constituents, the rise of my constituents who are also experiencing homelessness. As a state senator, some of the stories that are here are heartbreaking. And I think about how we fund public schools, not to then charge families tuition in order to go to those public schools because it's a public good. I think about how we also fund our libraries and have a robust public library system all across our communities, not because we want those libraries to become bookstores that then sell books to those very people, but because libraries and the resources are a public good. And then I think about RIPTA and how for a lot of my adulthood, whether it's an undergrad, having free bus transit, or a few years ago when we had the free R-Line pilot, where there was an increase in ridership, there were new people who were accessing it because it was now a free public good. And yes, we were able to do that because of COVID funding, but it is it's a testament to when there are resources allocated to a system and when there is public funding for these resources, more people use it, and it then becomes the public good that it's meant to be. During that pilot program, I had more and more constituents who decided that they didn't need their cars. More and more constituents who said, I had no idea RIPTA could take me from Providence to Newport. I was just at the Newport Jazz Festival, one of our crown jewel weekends, in addition to Folk Fest. I hopped on the RIPTA line at the end of the concert, and literally from Newport to Providence. There was standing room only on a bus to get from Newport to Providence. The entire route, standing room only. A testament to when we increase access to these buses, more people use them, and it takes people from our state and visitors to our state to really great places and really great locations. It also stimulates the economy. I also think about when I was at the Rhode Island football game last night. There was a big banner across the sign, from beaches to the stadium, use RIPTA. And then we hear about the devastating cuts. On my street alone, I've lived there for about 15 years on the east side. There's been so many cuts to services. Now, as an able-bodied young person, I can walk down a hill to get the R line, or I can walk up a hill to get to the number one. But many of my constituents can't make that same decision. Many constituents can't make the decision to use our RIPTA services. More and more people are unable to get to grocery stops. More people are unable to get to our robust downtown or commercial centers to populate and to buy goods from local businesses because we have divested from our system. And it's a policy choice. For years, we've known that RIPTA has had a funding shortfall, and we've chosen not to invest in RIPTA because we haven't seen the outcry of support, or we haven't listened to the people who say that if I have access to RIPTA, whether it's through a free program or through increased ridership or frequent lines, that we're not going to be able to use it. As more and more people are also conscious about the climate transition and how we're going to meet our climate goals, going carless is an option, but it's increasingly hard. I hear the ringer. But I hope that my constituents who represent the downtown where there's the most ridership and people from all across the state can see that there's a commitment both in our budget and years to come that we have allocated the resource to continue to see RIPTA just as we see our schools and our libraries as a public good that everyone should have access to, and that should be fully publicly funded so that no one has to worry about not having access to all of the great resources across our state. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Pat Ford, followed by Alex Taylor.
Good morning. My name is Pat Ford. I'm with the Coalition Radio Network, a local media organization. I typically defer to activist riders to go first before I speak. Of course, I'm here to discuss the route that shall not speak its name, R1636, from the RIPTA website. RIPTA is here to get you to all the Rhode Island home games and select special events at the stadium. Route R1636 will loop continuously between key bus stops in the stadium every 8 to 10 minutes per game. R1636 is the only RIPTA bus that will provide direct service to the stadium, dropping passengers off at nearby areas before. The free game day service, yes, the free one, been operating 3 hours before kickoff and continually until 1 hour after all the postgame. I was here at the last meeting. I asked that. I spoke to Mr. Alvey, direct my questions to the chair, who was mentioned for the record that he was not aware of that. Talk about that in a second. Point. Before that meeting, I issued an ARPA requesting a contract and a variety of communications that led up to the creation of that contract. I was denied 148 items. I was sent a copy of the contract. It turns out that RIPTA is getting compensated in the form of advertising. At a recent Woonsocket public hearing, when I was finally able to, well, AGs were pretty much confront, because they'd ignored all other forms of communication, the CEO of RIPTA explained to me that the purpose of this was used to get advertising to generate new ridership. So perhaps one of the most ludicrous moments in my career covering Rhode Island government, I realized that we are cutting service to people because of the lack of funds, yet we are working for free for a private entertainment company, because that's what a soccer team is. It's a private entertainment company. In order to get new riders, what? Replace the riders from the suburbs for all the folks here? I'm not supposed to editorialize, but that's idiotic. So flash forward, I have done an APRA request for the year-to-date operating costs of said line. Now again, 4 buses at least, 4 drivers, supervisory personnel, fixed costs, 4 hours a day, game days, as well as other events. That's going to start to add up. And that money, in addition to the $10 million of APRA funds the city of Kentucky gave to build the stadium, which could have been used for, I don't know if $10 million sounds familiar to anybody, but that seems to be a recurring number here for now. I request the operating costs. Well, the time is coming down. I haven't received a single communication. For the record, I filed yesterday a formal complaint with the Attorney General over the failure of RIPTA to communicate properly. I don't know if this is the new game plan. I don't know if this is a result of your assumption of senior leadership here, but the lack of transparency on some pretty fundamental issues. I'm assuming that RIPTA is using a job costing software. So it's fair to say that this should be accessible with a computer report. Yet weeks have gone by and I've heard nothing. So Mr. Alviti, under Rhode Island general laws, in a public comment, I am allowed to ask you questions that may or may not be on the agenda. So Mr. Alviti, number one, are you familiar with this now? Number two, do you have any assumption of cost? I hope I'm not interrupting your phone call here. Do you have any?
Well, you're not interrupting anything but all the other speakers. Your time is up. So if you could put your questions in written form and
I
submit
did,
them
and you
to,
haven't referred to the APRA that I just sent, so you're not even listening. I just told you I sent an APRA requesting that information, and you ignored it, and you'll get the letter from the Attorney General, which probably ignored. So pay attention.
Thank you.
Thank you. And by the way, final question, can we see the efficiency studies that have been done for RIDOT? Are any of them available publicly?
You could put your questions in
writing,
form.
which you'll ignore.
We'll answer.
Could
Thank
I just set up a standard fill in the blanks template for complaints to the Attorney General?
Thank you.
Bueller, sleep tight for now.
Thank you.
Alex Taylor and then Samantha Mock.
Hi, my name is Alex Taylor, Illinois Province. Thank you for taking the time to delay the vote and more fully consider the feedback you got from the sources here today. I think that is, thank you for doing your duty in that way. The case for RIPTA as a public good has been made well better than I could by other people, but I did want to sort of ground it in a little bit of specifics. I think that it appears from the outside that state leadership, DOT leadership use RIPTA as a thing for other people. Some people need this. Those people need this. And I think that it is unappreciated how the network effect, like how much effect this has on the whole state. At the end of his life, I had to have a lot of conversations with my dad about when it was time to give up his skis. He should not have been driving as long as he did. He lived in rural Colorado. And a big part of his argument was, it will cut me off from my community. It's isolated. There isn't meaningful public transit option there. If I don't have my car, I can't see my friends. I can't go to places that are important to me. And that was a really hard argument to get over. And these cuts are turning Rhode Island into that. You're imposing that situation on Rhode Islanders. This is an impact to that one person, but there's a network effect. People that choose to drive longer than they should are a danger to themselves, they're a danger to other people. And it's not a thing that you can sort of isolate and say, oh, well, these cuts will just impact those people. Those cuts have a ripple effect on the rest of the community. I'm currently trying to convince my mother to move out here, to move out of a less isolated environment into a place with a better support network. It'd be easier for me to support her, easier for her to get around and interact with the new community. These cuts will make that impossible. That argument will not be, I can't make it credible, with these cuts being considered. So, as other people have stated, your job is to wield your political capital to convince the governor and state leadership to find the money to fund the service. It is table stakes for a state to support its population this way. So, thank you for your time today. Please use the time that we've given you to make that change.
Thank you.
Next is Samantha Marr, and the final speaker signed up is Grant Healthcare.
Hi, my name is Samantha Marr. I had different remarks prepared for today. I testified last week in South County. I'm an MSW student at Rhode Island College up here in Providence. My internship and practicum was up here in Providence. I took the 69 to the 66 to the 20 to get here this morning. The cuts that have already happened made it difficult. I had to leave my house at 6:30 this morning to get here for 9:30 appointment to be on time, and that's before these cuts went through. If these cuts go through, I will not be able to go to grad school this fall. I won't be able to do my practicum placement. I won't be able to work in Providence. I just graduated with my undergraduate in the past spring. I used the UPass program, which I know people are talking about sponsorships for specific rides. In the year 2024, the UPass with Brown, all these other colleges, gave $670,000 towards your budget. Now, when you're stranding students on the 69 route, as you mentioned before, are those schools going to give you that much money next year or the year after that? Has that been looked to in this efficiency study? I wanted to walk in this building this morning. I ran into one of my drivers I see every day on the 65, and his job's going. And he's been doing that job for years. I was at CTRI, so now he's have to retire early because we're doing cuts. Why can't we find the money? I take the 66 every day that I go past the airport. Is $12 million to work on those stupid science and that law projects. This budget is $10 million. That's it. We can find the money. We've given you this extra time. I'm happy that you pushed the vote. My classes start in 3 weeks. I have to take out tens of thousands of dollars to be able to go to classes. If these cuts go through in September, and I have to take all these loans, I'm going to be stuck paying and not being able to go to school. There's human costs to each and every one of these tens of thousands of writers that take RIPTA every day. Each one of them has a story that's not showing in the efficiency study. The efficiency study showed that we should be investing more into this. And I hope for a better Rhode Island, for a better future. RIPTA is great, and I would like to see it being invested more, especially with all these stories. And that's what you hear when you go to these town halls. And I think it's really important that you remember the faces, remember the people, and give people a future, give people an opportunity. I would like to serve Rhode Island as a community health worker. We have a brain drain effect going into Connecticut, Massachusetts right now because we don't have reliable resources. I hope my future patients have the ability to take transit to get to where they need to go. There's just in the community of South County, the governor talked about how housing is a priority. A lot of the housing projects in South County are on the bus route 69 or just off. And with these routes, if these cuts go through, those investments will not be able to be made. And then so it's just, never mind the 2030 climate goals, never mind people not being able to get to doctor's appointments, never mind, it's not just a transit issue. It's an educational one, it's a health one. And I want people to remember that when they're making the vote next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Final speaker signed up is Grant Bulgarian.
Grant Bulgarian apologizes for slow pace. And surprised you didn't have a mic for today's meeting for everybody. I was outside for the first part of the meeting. I couldn't hear. Grant Bulgarian, lifetime environmentalist, longtime traveling advocate. Started being a transit advocate as a young adult. And I realized that was 1975. I was on the first Transportation Advisory Council. You know what that means? A century. Anyway, so I've been paying attention. So here's my series of recommendations. Let's say no to budget cuts. General Assembly will figure it out. They don't have a special session in the fall. They reconvene in January. Still enough time to give RIPTA the extra 10 million for this current fiscal year. In the meantime, I said this before, I'm going to say it again. It's time for RIPTA to take advantage of direct mail bus schedule to everybody who's ostensibly, theoretically, served by a bus line. It's supposedly a quarter of a mile in urban areas and a half a mile in rural areas. Everybody should get a bus schedule. They can magnet it to their refrigerator. I want to see RIPTA try to get more riders now than they had before Corona. And so what I'm suggesting is we probably need to direct mail appropriate the bus schedule to every household that's served twice. They'll get it the first time and say, get the second time, oh, maybe I ought to pay attention. That's number one. Number two, I'm a firm believer there's no such thing as free. So I'm not in favor of free. Firm believer in user fee. The universities don't provide free parking to their students, but the students have to pay for parking or figure out how they're going to do it. But universities are providing free bus passes. That's a very commendable combination. We should encourage that for other tax-exempt entities. That's what they should do. I have numbers. Have a conversation with me. Happy to share them with you. That's a a policy that should be followed. No such thing as free parking. Parking costs money. You gotta acquire it, you gotta pave it, you gotta stripe it, you gotta sweep in the summer, plow in the winter, light it at night, patrol it year round. No such thing as free parking. Here we are in an era of climate change, global warming, carbon emissions, the most contributing sector to carbon emissions in the state around is what? Transportation. For 40%. We should be going in the direction of charging for parking. Doesn't have to be big charging. Charge, just an incentive to get people to think about riding the bus. And I always say people are working 5 days a week. They want to do errands after work. They want to take the car because they want to do their errands as time efficiently as possible. They're not doing errands every day after work. So, 1 or 2 days, 2 or 3 days, if they're not doing errands, they can take the bus. We got to incentivize them. Check it out, try it out, find out how wonderful RIPTA is, and then maybe, just maybe, they'll encourage their friends. I have other suggestions and recommendations, but I know my 3 minutes. I hear my 3 minutes are up. I've asked for time to speak with CEO, time to speak with chairman, time to speak with labor leader. And so I look forward to being able to do that, hopefully in the month of August, because this is supposedly the quarter month. So thank you all for your concern. That's why you're on the board. And look forward to your leadership going forward. Thanks. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
That's all the speakers who have signed up.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn be in order?
Have a motion? Have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Meeting is adjourned.